Um, we will start chapter 1 now. We're going to start with section 1.1, which hopefully is a review for you. This should be review topics. So let's go ahead and get started. So this is section 1.1, and it is over real numbers, inequalities, and lines. So if not for all, for most, this should be a review. I do want to point out, if after going over this, if you're like, wow, it's been a while, I need some additional practice, I'm going to tell you where to find some practice problems. So in WebAssign, go to the ebook, page 16, and 1 through 49 odd. 83 and 85. Now, I won't always mention practice problems, but at the end of each section in the ebook, there are always additional problems that you can work if you feel like that you need additional practice. All right, so what we're going to start with is sets and intervals. I want to look at a number line. Okay, so there's different notation that we need to remember, and you'll see this in WebAssign, and so you need to know the difference between set notation and also we will deal with interval notation. All right, so I'm going to draw a couple of examples. All right, so if we're talking about the numbers that are highlighted in yellow, and so in set notation, you use the squiggly brackets, and it would be x is any number such that x is greater than -1. And because this is like a parenthesis rather than a bracket, it is just greater than. It is not greater than or equal. Whereas if this was the notation, so now it's a bracket rather than a parenthesis, this would be x is any number such that x is less than or equal to -3. Now, in interval notation, if we go back to the yellow, since it's parentheses, it starts at -1, and I use a parentheses to represent it's not equivalent to -1, and it goes all the way out here, which is positive infinity, so I just put infinity, whereas the pink one, so you always go left to right. So I don't put -3 on the left because the numbers are going to the left. So what numbers are to the left of here? This would be negative infinity, and all the numbers to -3, but since it can include -3, then I use a bracket rather than parentheses. So just a reminder on set notation and interval notation. So now we're going to look at lines and slopes. And so the first thing that we're going to look at is the slope of a line. Now, the formula for the slope of the line is M, which represents slope, is the change in y over the change in x, which you've most likely seen it as y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. So this would be how to find the slope of a line. So we're going to look at a few examples. So the point 1, 3 and -2, 5. So this would be considered x1, y1, x2, y2. So putting it into the formula, that would then be 5 minus 3 over -2 minus 1. So you get 2 over -3, or -2/3. So since it is a negative slope, then we know the line slopes downward. 0.93, -1, 3. So again, x1, y1, x2, y2. So the slope would be 3 minus 3 over -1 minus 9. So we get 0 over -10. 0 divided by -10 is equal to 0. So the slope is 0, which is a unique situation, a horizontal line. And then another point, -3, 4, -3, 7. My slope is 7 minus 4 over -3 minus -3, which would be +3. So you would get 3 over 0. You cannot have a 0 in the denominator. So this is what we call undefined, or does not exist. And this is a vertical line. So those are the scenarios. Now, our horizontal and vertical lines are unique equations. And we know this is our x-axis, and this is our y-axis. So what I want to look at is if I went and had a vertical line here. This, of course, has a slope that is undefined or does not exist. And the equation, what you do is you look at where does it cross the axis, and it crosses the x-axis at 0.2. So this equation would be x equals 2. So you don't have an x and a y variable. So when it's a vertical line, you will only have the x variable. Whereas if we had, say, a 1, 2, 3 horizontal line, the slope of this is 0. It crosses the y-axis. So this equation would be y equals -3. So be careful on those. Those tend to stump students a little bit. Sometimes they just forget. All right. Now, we just looked at two equations of a line. We looked at the equation of a vertical line, which was x equals some number, and then we looked at the equation of a horizontal line, which was y equals some number. What we're most familiar with, or what we see most often on the equation of a line, is in one of two forms. So you need to refresh your memory on slope-intercept form. And this is y equals mx plus b. Now, we can use this when m, which is your slope, is known, and where it crosses the y-axis. If those two things are known, just substitute it into the formula. But most often you're not given those, so you have to a lot of times first use point slope form, which is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. So this is when you either have or you can find the slope, and you have or can find a point on the line, which would be your x1, y1. Once you substitute those numbers in, then what you would do is most likely then simplify your equation and solve for y to put it into slope-intercept form. So we're actually going to look at an application problem that you will see that will utilize those. Okay, so here's what we have. This came from the book. In the short run, per capita personal income, which is known as PCPI in the United States, grows approximately linear. So when it says it grows linear, it means it makes a straight line. In 2009, the PCPI was 38.6, and in 2012, it had grown to 42.8. Both of those numbers, the 38.6 and this, are in thousands of dollars, okay? So we're given the year, and the 2 years we're given are 2009 and 2012, and then we're given PCPI, which is 38.6 and 42.8. All right, now notice in part A, it says use the two. So the X coordinate is your year and the Y coordinate is your PCPI. But be careful, they're not using year as in 2009, they're calling it year one. So the ordered pair here is year one, is 38.6. And then if 2009 is year one, 2009, 10, 11, 12. So that means 2012 is year four at 42.8. So that's where they get that 4. Okay, so it says to find the linear relationship, this is part A, we have y equals mx plus b between X years since 2008. So 2008 is when X equals 0. So it wants us to put it into a linear equation. Well, notice, one, I don't have the slope yet, but I can definitely find the slope. I don't have the y-intercept though, so I'm going to have to use point slope form. All right, so the first thing that I want to do in part A though is I want to find my slope, which is the difference in the y's. So we would have 42.8 minus 38.6 minus my difference in x's, which would be 4 minus 1. And when you simplify that in the calculator, it comes out to 1.4. Now, this is a positive number, so that tells me that my line is going upward, okay? All right, so now since I don't have the y-intercept, I'm going to use the point slope formula. And so that is y minus y1, and I'm just going to use this first number. So y minus 38.6 equals the slope we just calculated times x minus x1, which would be 1. So I'm going to solve this for y. I get 1.4x minus 1.4. I'm going to add 38.6 to both sides. So my linear equation in slope-intercept form is y equals 1.4x plus 37.2. Now, here in a little bit, we're going to go to Desmos, which is a great graphing website you can use on your computer. but I want to finish. Let's see the problem here. So B, interpret the slope of the line. All right, so in part B, we know that we calculated the slope to be 1.4. And because it is positive, then we know it increases. So it increases by 1.4, but then you have to remember this is thousands of dollars per year. So that's part B. Part C says use your linear relationship to predict PCPI in the year 2020. So it wants us to predict for the year 2020. All right, so we know that 2009 is 1. So 2009, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So that tells me that 2020, that is the 12th year. Now, another way that you could do that is, since we know 2008 was 0, just take 2020 minus 2008 and you get your 12th year. So we're going to take our equation, and in place of X, we are going to predict what happens in the year 2020. I bet it's not predicting that a pandemic happened in 2020. So when you calculate this, you get 54. So this gives me the order pair, the 12th year. Your PCPI would be 54. So we're going to go over and look at that. I've already graphed it. So here is the equation of the line. And if you'll notice, it's just going upwards. And then here's the point 1254. So again, that's year 2020, because these go by twos. So right here, 1 was year 2009. Here would be 2010, 12, 14, 16, 18, 2020. And then your y-axis is your PCPI. And there would be 54, because here's 50 to 4. So that is what it looks like on a graph. So that is your review over real numbers, inequalities, and lines for what you'll need to be able to do on the WebAssign assignment.